Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this hybrid session on restoring landscapes and green water flows through innovative finance. And it's organized by SIWI, together with the International Rainwater Harvesting Alliance, Meta Meta, and Tieni, an NGO from Malawi, you will soon hear more about. And my name is Anna Tengberg, and I'm a senior advisor at SIWI's Research, Development and Innovation Unit. We have a very interesting program for you here today. Next, can you? Oh, okay, sorry. Yes, we have a very interesting agenda here, as you can see. Where we start with the presentation of SIWI's initiative on transforming investments in Africa's rainfed agriculture, a program that's been going on for some time. Then we will have a presentation on example of practices in the Zambezi Basin on deep bed farming from Tieni. And then we will hear more about metrics for measuring watershed impacts of investments in watershed management and enhanced rainfed agriculture. Then we have a panel discussion followed by presentation by Meta Meta and then from INRA, and we also finalize everything with the panel discussion. So now it is my pleasure to invite our first presenter, David Mingason, who is a program officer at SIWI, who will introduce the Tiara initiative to you. Welcome, David.
Yeah. So hello everyone, my name is David Mangasson and I'm a project officer at SIWI, and I'm going to introduce you to the Transforming Investment in African Rainfed Agriculture program, which is a 5-year program led by SIWI. So this program is a collaboration between 3 countries, namely Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. And we have local NGOs in each of these countries, namely Komako, Fatigue, CTDT, and Tieni from Malawi. And we also work with partners that work across different countries, namely the Global Water Partnership, the Zambezi Watercourse Commission, ZAMCOM, also C4ECRAF, and World Agroforestry. And this program is supported by Leopold Bachmann Foundation and SIDA. So smallholder farmers are often described as frontline managers of water because they play a critical role in the sustainable use, allocation, and conservation of water resources in agricultural system. And by applying the triple bottom line framework, which evaluates sustainability across environmental, social, and financial dimensions, we can better understand their pivotal role in water stewardship. So a recent study of the Zambezi River Basin determined that 51% of land is moderately degraded and 14% is highly degraded. And this degradation has led to reduced water holding capacity of soils and reduced soil water infiltration, reducing the amount of water in the soil available for crop growth. Thus, we thought that enhanced rain-fed agriculture would have great benefit in these regions. So we identified 5 hotspots across Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Malawi. So Tiara is an initiative aiming to unlock the potential of enhanced rain-fed agriculture in Africa, and it is constituted of 3 components. So first we have the political leadership and advocacy, which aims to enable high-level leadership and political commitments to support green water solutions and unlock public and private investments in enhanced rain-fed agriculture. Second, we have the capacity development pillar that covers the enhanced rain-fed agricultural practices and nature-based solutions, as well as approaches to scaling up sustainable and resilient practices at the landscape and watershed scale. And lastly, we have the last component that focuses on knowledge generation and business case development to attract finance to sustainable and resilient agricultural practices, including metrics for measuring watershed impacts. So under component 1, Tiara seeks to mobilize public and private investments to enhance water productivity, climate resilience, and food security in vulnerable regions. And for example, on the right side of this slide, we can see a statement of intent of ZAMCOM members highlighting their visions and objectives. By enhancing rain-fed agriculture, Africa can unlock the immense potential of its underutilized arable land, boosting crop yields, productivity, improving in-field water efficiency, food security, and also strengthening climate resilience for smallholder farmers. Enhanced rain-fed agriculture can also be financially interesting, as it produces 6 times more crop yield per dollar invested than investments in mechanized irrigated agriculture. We have also developed different knowledge projects focusing on greenwater as an essential but underappreciated part of the water cycle. So as part of the capacity development pillar, we did an exchange we did a learning and exchange visit in Zimbabwe in April 2025 to learn from and share experiences with farmers in rural areas who had implemented agroecological practices and in various projects led by local NGOs, namely CTDT and FACHIG. And for example, in this field visit, farmers introduced us to various soil and water conservation techniques, such as infiltration pits. And this technique enabled the harvesting of water, and roots from the downstream crops pumps the water that is stored into that pit. Under component 3, Tieni partnered with the Northern Region Water Board to develop a winning funding proposal for the Linyungwa project, securing critical financing from the Global Innovation Fund. And the objective for Tieni was to provide evidence that deep bed farming delivers tangible benefits for farmers while enhancing both water quality and availability in the Linyungwa River watershed. The monitoring studies enabled the comparison of the conventional ridge with the deep bed farming practice. And as we can see on this figure, the deep bed farming, the total cost per hectare has been reduced by almost $200, and also in using deep bed farming, the gross margin per acre in USD have almost been multiplied by 5, and the gross margins per hectare have been multiplied by 6. So thank you for your attention, and we have now prepared 2 questions where we would like to hear your input. So we have prepared this Mentimeter, so please scan this QR code or go to www.menti.com and enter the following code, please. Is that possible that you switch to the results? No. You have the link on the run sheet normally in the comment column. Yeah, yeah.
I will try again. Yes. Okay, let's see now. What was the question? Which factor do you think is most critical for scaling up enhanced rainfed agriculture? Okay, and it looks like farmer-led technologies. Their access to good technologies is leading here, followed by government policies and incentives. Private sector, well, sorry, we had over there access to innovative finance also come up very high. And then we have policies and incentives and private sector partnerships. Yeah, that says a little bit about what we should focus on, actually, supporting farmer-led technologies and their scaling up. So I don't know. I think maybe we need to continue, and we skipped the second question we had prepared. We can come back to that later and move on with the program and go back to the presentation. And now I have the pleasure to invite Mr. Isaac Shavula from TNE in Malawi. He's the director of TNE Malawi and has traveled all the way from Mususu in northern Malawi to make this keynote presentation today. It took about 3 days to come to Stockholm, I can inform you. So welcome, Isaac, to speak about deep bed farming and how to mobilize innovative finance.
Thank you very much. I welcome you all to the debate Farming in Malawi presentation, leveraging innovative finance in sustainable agriculture to reach SDGs for climate, food, and water. My name is Isaac Shavula, and I'm the country director for TN in Malawi. Malawi is 8th in terms of rating in its poverty, but basically this country is agriculture-based. The economy is agriculture-based. And in Malawi, we have more than 20 million people relying on what we produce in the agriculture sector. The major fault that makes us produce low is that even after 80% of the population of smallholder farmers, produce their agricultural crops, they depend on rain-fed. And as such, rain-fed agriculture has not done us good in terms of the way we practice, the way we create our beds, and the way we create our ridges. In cultivation, we use hand-hoe, and this hand-hoe has created hard pan in the way we cultivate. For instance, in the picture, you can see that the ridges that we make, we plant, and then every year you have to split that ridge to a new ridge which is actually forming on a furrow. So in this way, we have a compaction, a layer that has been cemented and is very hard. One, it creates very tough, it becomes very hard for rainwater to penetrate, but also it is very difficult for roots to develop fully. So this hard pan that we have created is creating a situation which is promoting loss of soils due to soil erosion, such that every year from a hectare of land that is cultivated, Malawi is losing 29 tons of topsoil. And mind you, the topsoil that we are talking about that is getting lost is that fertile soil, which is enriched with organic manure, and it gets lost. So because the hard pan is difficult for roots to penetrate, what happens is that when the rains come, it will saturate the topsoil. And once the topsoil is saturated, it has to go with the water that is getting out. And also the roots that are failing to penetrate to go vertical, they go lateral. And once the dry spell comes, then those crops will be drying, will be wilting, because they cannot hit where, they cannot get to down where the water is. And that is, creating very low yields. And potentially, Malawi can have more than 10 tons of maize being our staple food, 10 tons of maize from a hectare of land. Yet, at the moment, we have an average of about 2 tons. So that's why it explains the poverty that is in Malawi. More than 71% of the people in Malawi are poor. So to reverse this situation, the government of Malawi agreed with what DN came up with. In an innovation we call the deep bed farming, we had to subject this deep bed farming to government testing or researching on it with the aim to approve it. So after 3 seasons of testing, the government agreed to release the climate smart agriculture method we call deep bed farming, which was developed by DN. So in the picture you can also see that the deep bed farming on one hand and the conventional ridge farming on the other, and you can compare the crops that after 3 weeks of dry spell, what you see there is that the deep bed farming is quite different in terms of yield improvement on crops or the health status of the crop, as you can see. That's why it is a low cost but high yielding technology or method of farming. In essence, if we calculate the profitability, deep bed farming will be 9 times more profitable in year 1. And because of the additional organic matter that we keep on adding, the profitability goes up to over 12 times the conventional profitability. So it's basically because this method drastically reduces soil erosion. And as it does that, it allows that water to go down the soil profile and become available to recharge the water table. So because the whole landscape receives water that is available, it transforms to green, and the whole catchment becomes very lively and healthy because of vegetation cover. This brings a high level of resilience. Now let's look at the design of this deep bed I'm talking about. The design is in such a way that the furrows are deep enough and wide to accommodate any rainfall storm in Malawi. And as soon as the waters accumulate in the furrows, you can actually see that they go down and become available to crops, but also become available to feed the aquifer down the soil profile. So the measurements are in such a way that the furrows are harvesting the water in full. Over 90% of rainwater is harvested. And the beds are wide enough to make sure that we plant as many crops on top as possible. So it is beneficial in that the farmer will get income from a variety of resources, crops that are grown, but also these crops are providing the farmer with nutrition. So the farmer will have food, the farmer will have income, but also the environment in the field will be so conducive to have healthy soils. So deep bed farming is quite useful in managing our landscapes. But let me take you through some of the stages that we do to make sure that we have permanent structures we call deep beds. You can see picture number 1 depicts a situation which is very common in sub-Saharan Africa. And Malawi in particular has those fields, showing of the compacted layer underneath due to poor ridge alignment and erosion that takes place. We have compacted layer. So that layer must be broken down for us to start now, being agricultural productive again. So picture 2 is showing as soon as we have broken the hard pan, normally we break the hard pan to about 30 centimeters. When we do that, we are creating a field that is now ready for deep bed fields to be created. So picture number 3 is showing the next step. After breaking the hard pan, what we do is to come up with contour marker ridges. Those contour marker ridges are helpful in that we align our furrows and flat-top beds along those contours. That in itself creates a field that, even though it is at a slope, will have a zero sloping, because of that, because of the configuration of the field. So in those furrows, we achieve over 90% of water harvesting. So you can actually appreciate that if you look at picture number 4, the water has been accumulated. Soon after the rains, we have those waters gathering there. But very shortly, that water is expected to go down. Why? It's because we have broken the hard pan, the barrier that was hindering water infiltration. So the crops that are grown there are healthy because they have all the nutrients. They are resilient to any water stress due to dry spells, and that is very common in Malawi and in sub-Saharan Africa. Rainfall is very unreliable. So the crops that are on deep beds will withstand any dry spell. So you can see number 5, picture number 5 depicts a lady there cultivating the fields under deep bed with a lot more crops grown on it. The crops look healthy. And that brings the aspect of having sustainable food security to households, income security to households, because after sales will become, will have more income. So the households that were formerly poor are now transforming to become better to do or wealthier than before, because they have the food, they have money, and they are living happy lives. So apart from that aspect of deep bed farming contributing to the food security and the income security, deep bed farming has a very important role in making sure that we feed the groundwater. The groundwater level is fed, and then we have on safe supply the ability for households to access safe water. So these families or these communities fabricate the wells themselves. As you can see in the picture number 6, they fabricate locally. They also, sell to their fellow farmers, and they drill. They train the communities to become able to do all the activities that are around water well drilling and extraction of water from the groundwater. So that is, in itself is achieving sustainable development goal number 6. So you can see the deep bed farming has a variety of significant areas which will make or transform the communities to become resilient to climate change impacts. So let me show you how deep bed farming is used to manage watersheds. We have watersheds that are, we practice deep bed farming to transform the watersheds. And because of the aspects of high rainfall water harvesting, the deep bed farming is used in such watersheds to transform it, and then they become much greener. We recover the habitat, and then the water is also clean because we reduce on soil erosion. And surface runoff, which is bringing a lot of dirt into water, is cut off. And in the end, you end up with very clean water. As you can see in the picture, that is what deep bed farming does. It improves vegetative cover. so that the whole catchment is transformed. And water quality, as I've said, is also enhanced. And we work with farmers who are using no chemicals. We are encouraging them to use organic manure. And in that case, naturally, the waters will be safe and clean. So deep bed farming is also very important in the Zambezi Basin as a technology that can reverse the situation. And the TN is part of the Tiara program, and my colleague was just focusing on that. We have transforming investment in agriculture, in African rain-fed agriculture, and that is very important for this technology to go to all these other riparian states in the Zambezi Basin. It will create an impact. Why I'm saying so, it's because when we achieve better management of rainwater, it will lead into increased food security. It will lead into creation of jobs. How are jobs created? It's because the value chain of the increased agricultural produce that will be transformed or processed to create jobs. In the process, we will create more jobs and people will be employed in that sector. And it's not only that. By doing that, it means societies will be resilient to climate change impacts. We tackle the challenges of climate change through such initiatives. And that is why the aim of the project is attracting investment in rain-fed agriculture in Africa. And that's why I'm calling for all the investors to really invest in the rain-fed agriculture, especially in Southern Africa, and in particular, Malawi. So we have a pilot project that is taking the PES model to demonstrate that the deep bed farming is really creating positive impact. So this is the Lunyangwa Watershed Management Program. It is a holistic and sustainable multi-stakeholder approach. And it's going to run for 5 years, and we are targeting 120,000 farmers. And with this project, we aim at creating various indicators to follow them and then measure the impacts. What is it doing? What is DBF bringing us in the catchment? And those impacts will be measured and shared. And Stockholm International Water Institute is leading on that to make sure that the world is aware of what we are doing in Malawi that can help reverse the situation which has been created by climate change. So, to conclude, what I've said is that deep bed farming will bring in more than doubling the crop yields and also harvesting more than 90% of rainwater, but also recharging the aquifers and also significantly reducing the farmland erosion, which in Malawi I said is more than 29 metric tons of soil are getting lost. And also it will reduce siltation and pollution of surface water systems, and also bring quick increase in profitability, and finally restore the habitats that are being degraded. So the solution is under our feet, and I thank you.
So thank you very much, Isaac, for very interesting presentation of the very good work you're doing in Malawi. I don't think we have time for questions right now, but we can take it later when in connection with our panel discussions. As we are, I think, a little bit behind schedule here. I'm just going to check. In the meantime, I would like to invite Dr. Maganisu Kruger-Nuasulu to speak about metrics for measuring watershed impacts of investments in enhanced rainfed agriculture, which is very important, which Isaac also pointed out, to enable the scaling up of good practices. And Maganisu is also from Malawi, but he completed his PhD here in Sweden at Stockholm Resilience Center and is now a postdoc at Oxford University. So you're welcome to start. I'm just going to check where we are with the time. Okay.
Right, thanks. I'm Maganizo Kruganyasulu, and one point that Anna forgot to say is that I'm also a postdoc on the Tiara project with SIWI as well. So just to give you a glimpse of what I'm going to be talking in the next few minutes is that first I want to introduce Zephania Chavura, who is a local farmer in Mzuzu in Malawi, and his practices upstream can have impact on both what my colleague was just saying on water quality in terms of like how the management systems, either it's the pollution that comes from agriculture practice or the filtration also, and that can also have impact on hydroelectric power, like accessibility to water, enough water flux so that it can be able like, to produce more energy. And on top of that, it can also have impact both at policy level as well as at institution level. And my core presentation today is that I want to focus more on the part where we connect both the environmental factors as well as the financing factors. And the key part is that when you look at most of investments in this type of sectors, that they need verification processes to ensure that, okay, if you're implementing a certain aspect, how sure are you that it's going to have impact? So that's where the verification metrics come into play. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to talk a little bit about the framework that we looked at and some metrics, as well as present a few case studies and show some implications about it. So to begin with, the framework is that the framework is sort of like adapted on existing metrics that are around, and basically we look at what are the sources of financing mechanisms and how are those sources of financing mechanisms feed into the enhanced rainwater management as one of the target management system in rain-fed agriculture, and how those feed into the ecosystems. It's not really dark enough, but it's okay. And how the these ecosystem services that are being produced or the indicators can influence the verification processes, and how the verification processes again impact both the ecosystem as a feedback loop, as well as how these can sort of like inform at sector level. And we have two case studies, one which look at the global using modeling approach, as well as another one that looks into Lunyangwa River Basin using remote sensing data. So as I pointed out, so the investment mechanisms can both be at early stage as well as at financing at scaling stage, and most early stage are more targeting the public side of the angle. But at the same time, also we can have like managements that can sort of like be fed as key investment targets. And in terms of ecosystem, when we look at soil water metrics, we can look at them in different aspects. So I'll just give three of the key examples is that we look at it from soil health, water availability, as well as water flow impact. And on soil health, there are different mechanisms that you can use for verification. It can be either soil organic carbon, or it can be soil degradation. And water availability can be in terms of like water scarcity, as well as soil moisture component. And on availability of stream flow, it's more connected to the water flow. And all these aspects do not only feed into they do not only feed into agriculture alone, but also feed into different sectors. So I'll just talk a little bit on the method. I'll not talk of it more exhaustively. So for instance, when we talk about soil health metrics, which we sort of like pointed out earlier, that they feed into soil organic carbon or soil loss. But one thing that we have to know is that how does this verification component impact, and how can these be verified? So for instance, soil organic carbon can be assessed using these fluxes of soil organic carbon at different thresholds, which I'm going to show later. And soil loss can also be assessed using different models. And one of the modeling approaches using the revised universal soil loss equation, which is also widely used. And beyond that, also you can look at soil stress by one of the metrics that we've been working on, where we look at the flux in terms of like how much does a plant require and how much of the water is available, and look at it across time horizon, and also incorporating like different climatic scenarios. And yeah, so same as soil moisture is just look at the soil water balance, and the stream flow is looking at the runoff component. And how are these sort of like analysis conducted? So they can both be conducted from a remote sensing approach as well as from the modeling approach. With remote sensing, it's more around trying to just see what is being observed, either in situ data correction or satellite data correction, or it can be from the modeling where you use process models. An example of process model would be the Lund Potsdam Jena managed land, which is called LPGML, and other models that are also out there that can be used to sort of like assess this. And the only difference with the modeling approach and the remote sensing approach is that remote sensing, if you want to do like maybe predictive analysis, then you have to use different methods. You might be using some machine learning models or other regression-based models. And for the simulation type, for the simulation type approach, you use more scenario approach, like using the what is called the shared socioeconomic pathways, which are both climate as well as socioeconomic components being merged together. All right, and normally you do this by looking at the intervention process, like before intervention and after intervention, what has changed? Has maybe the change in soil water metric gone up, or has the change in soil water metric gone down? And at the end of the day, it's just a comparison of what was before and what is going to be after. So enough about these fuzzy talk. I'll just give you like some key examples of some of the metrics that we have sort of like looked at, starting with the Runyangwa Basin. So if you don't know where Malawi is located, so Malawi is located in this part, and the Runyangwa River Basin is located in this part. And the demography of the basins, like you have one side which is more mountainous, another side which is more flatter, but at the same time you also have like these vegetative cover, farming, as well as urban area as well. And so an example of one soil health metric is the soil organic carbon. So normally soil organic carbon can be assessed using different data sets. So these are two examples of data sets. And these plots that you see up here is the plot of soil, like the one on the y-axis is the depth. So we're starting from the top soil to the bottom soil. And the one on the top is just showing the density of soil organic carbon. So you'd see that the top soil is the most with the highest soil organic carbon. And so we have one for using the soil grid data sets, as well as the other one using the open land map data sets. And beyond that, we can also assess soil health from soil degradation, something that Isaac pointed out about the mapping soil organic carbon. So normally these can be assessed using the method that I mentioned earlier about raster. So basically it's just looking at different components from precipitation, soil, or the elevation level, and how runoff sort of like impact all these components. And one key thing is that you can end up coming up with different factors for each aspect. So you have the factors that are more focusing on soil cover or runoff or sector practices and other things. And in the end, you develop like maps like these ones, which are more looking at transgression, like from 1990 all the way to 2020, how has the soil loss impacted? And if you can see in Lunyangwa, it's like, yeah, the soil loss has really increased over the course of the time. And beyond that, we can also conduct like at a global level, where we take all the management systems like the deep bed farming systems, feed them into a model, and see how, if it is implied, like if it's implemented across the globe, and see how it will impact both the soil loss aspect and how it also impacts the, for the soil loss, I just want to give kudos to Stefanovic, who is one of the colleagues from PIC, who did like one of the assessments on soil loss. And for our assessment, of course, we've done like the stream flow, more looking at the discharge, as well as we've looked at the greenwater stress, which is a metric that I mentioned earlier on. And beyond that, we can also model the management, and we can model the management and see how the management changes different environmental aspects. So these might be soil organic carbon. How has this management impact change in soil organic carbon? So you'd see the darker it is, the higher the soil organic carbon that has taken place over a course of 30 years since the implementation. And we can also see how it impacts the soil moisture flux, and also the root zone soil moisture flux. These are two. Root zone is something that is available to the plant root, and the other one is just the general soil moisture. So looking at all these things, I think it's need to sort of like talk a little bit of what are the implications. So we've talked about the vilification methods like the soil organic carbon, soil degradation, and others. The key component that we have to take note is that if soil organic carbon is not managed, it can lead to a carbon source. And the impact of carbon source is that it's going to affect climate change, carbon being one of the GHG gases. But there's also a leverage point when you look at the financing that it looks more into the soil organic carbon. Yeah, so I'll just finish off by saying that one other impact that can be also looked at is how industries like hydroelectric power as well as water utility, how they are impacted by siltation, but through damage as well as through equipment loss. But all these can be reduced by reducing costs. So thank you very much for the talk.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Maganiso. And now that we have heard these interesting presentations about what is required to enhance investments in rainfed agriculture, I would like to welcome our first panel that will be participating online. So our first panelist is Mr. Francis Montali, who is the CEO of the Northern Region Water Board in Malawi. Our second panelist is Mr. Malcolm Spence, who is the Managing Director of the Public Sector Team at the Global Innovation Fund that TNE is working with, as you saw. And then we have Macpherson Natara, who is a Deputy Director of Land Resources Conservation in Malawi. So welcome to all of you. And I would like to ask the first question to Francis. How can governments incentivize private investors to invest in landscape restoration projects that prioritize long-term ecological health alongside financial returns? Over to you, Francis. We can't hear you.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me now?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. Indeed, government has a greater role in incentivizing private sector to come in the land restoration globally. But maybe before I bring my argument around what government can do, is to really unpack what private investors think about each time they want to invest. So if you are a private sector, the first thing that you are always worried about in investment is the capital. And for the capital, the questions come around is where will the capital come from if I have to invest, more so in a unique investment of land restoration. And one would think about it could be on capital, so the equity. So most private sectors already have capital and they may be willing to invest in the land restoration. Or indeed, they may be thinking about external capital, and this would be in form of grants or loans. So as a private sector, they would always want clarity on how they want to invest, where the capital come from. And I strongly believe that the government's role in this agenda for the private sector is to bring in clarity as to what's the best form of capital that one as a private sector would use to invest in land restoration. If you talk about capital as an investor, you're always wondering, will this capital be there again tomorrow if I invest? In other words, you are thinking about returns. I strongly believe that government needs to also give guidance, clear guidance on what kind of returns would the private sector have? I know there are the broader returns, but the private sector, being private sector, would really want to be very clear about the specific returns that will grow their capital once invested. So there is sustainability in their investments. So I strongly believe that the government needs to bring in that clarity on the, if I invest as a if I invest capital as a private investor, what is it that I will get back? I think that is very pertinent to a private sector. And in capital return chain, there is always the risks that the private sector will be worried about. What risks are there if I put my money into land restoration? And I thought government can guide the private sector clearly on the expected risks, and indeed how the private sector would mitigate or navigate around those risks so that they can still get the returns that they require in both in the short and long term as they participate in the land restoration agenda. So my key argument is that there's need to be very clear framework of investment. There's need to be very clear framework of investment. How do the private sector come in? Even how do the private sector exit, and what do they get by the end of the day? I think that is very important for the private sector to be to be very clear. The second thing is the issue of government's role in the issues of taxes. As a private sector, they would really want to see that the investment in land restoration, which has a broader benefit to the population, has some tax incentives built around it. So what are the taxable allowances that the government can put in place to incentivize private sector to come in? Because if I'm a private sector and I invest on the one hand, and my expenditure on the such investment like land restoration is not allowable for tax purposes, I would not be keen to invest in such an investment. So that's another role that government needs to do to be clear that the incentives around taxes or indeed tax holidays if you invest in land restoration. The other aspect is around where is this land and how does the private sector get involved? So the land allocation itself, currently, if I were to talk about the situation in Malawi, is that the land is primarily owned by the chiefs and how does the private sector then get involved into, say, Runyangwa catchment, for example, and start investing in there? Is there a clear framework for such involvement? I think at the moment it is not very clear, and I strongly believe that the private sector will only be moved if it is very clear that land allocation or indeed involvement into already allocated land by the private sector is very clear, and therefore they should be free to come in and participate. I already talked about the capital aspect, and the capital aspect is mainly either equity, own capital, and grants and loans for a start, because the private sector are not very sure about the risks. They would be very unwilling to engage their own capital into land restoration. So for a start, what we need is for government to collaborate with multilateral financiers, or indeed government itself, to provide grants or indeed soft loans to the private sector, so they can utilize this and learn from it and invest in land restoration and realize the returns that they want in the end. So in summary, I'm saying we need to be clear about the capital. Particularly government needs to incentivize by bringing soft loans or indeed grants in collaboration with the multilateral financiers. At the same time, government needs to guide in coming up with the risks involved in land restoration.
Okay.
So that it's very clear as a private sector, if I go into this, these are the risks and this is how I can mitigate. But also in the final analysis is for sustainability, these are the returns that I will get if I do that. Cutting across in all this, and I'm going back to the presentation that Isaac made on deep bed farming, and also the situation in countries like Malawi, where we are still using a hoe to do our farming, or indeed in the practices for land restoration. I would want government to be in the forefront in the enhancement of mechanization. So a deep bed should not be done by a hoe or by a farmer in a rural setting. Some simple technologies that could be there should be able to help both the private sector and indeed local farmers to come in and invest, because that will bring down the costs of engagement and enhance the returns. Let me stop there.
Thank you very much for that very comprehensive answer to my question. And I think that brings us to the investor's perspective. And Malcolm Spence from the Global Innovation Fund. As an investor, how does GIF think about de-risking innovations like deep bed farming to better position them for scale? Now it seems he disappeared. Oh, he's there. Okay. Malcolm, did you hear my question?
Yes, I did. Hi, Anna. Thanks for having me, and thanks for your question. So the Global Innovation Fund, we're a development institution, so we're funded by different bilateral aid agencies, including Sweden. And our goal is to find and fund development practices which have the potential to be more impactful or cost-effective at scale than the business as usual. So we care about development outcomes first. So one point that I wanted to make is that the session here is about innovative finance for landscape restoration. But one of the unique features of these kind of suite of rain-fed agriculture interventions that we're talking about is that they're development, they're agricultural interventions in the first place. And the reason that's important as an investor, a lot of the proposals that we receive for landscape restoration or nature-based solutions are nature first, with an aspiration to contribute to some livelihood outcomes for people in poverty. Whereas this is the other way around. We know that these interventions provide kind of good outcomes for poor smallholder farmers. And we're interested to see whether adopted at scale, they can also benefit the wider watershed. And I think that's important because it provides a whole suite of, it differentiates these approaches from other nature-based solutions or other landscape restoration techniques. So that's the first point. To your question on how we think about de-risking. So we look for promising practices, and the easiest way that we can kind of conceptualize de-risking is accumulating different proof points, different pieces of evidence that add weight to the impact of the underlying approach in a way that's likely to crowd in subsequent investment. So I think we've seen from the presentations today, David described these as triple bottom line approaches. one of the challenges that you have with those approaches is that, and we saw it in Dr. Nyasulu's presentation as well, is that there's a whole host of different pieces of evidence or potential forms of impact that you can prioritize. I think one of the ways that we're working with TNA is to try and pinpoint the pieces of evidence which are most important for innovative finance or for subsequent investment. So we've heard a lot about productivity and food security metrics, and Dr. Nyasulu's given a good account of all the soil and watershed impacts. So I just wanted to emphasize a couple of pieces of evidence that haven't been spoken about. And that relates to the unit economics. I think what Francis was alluding to is that we need a good financial model if we're going to be able to scale these interventions. So one of the things that we're supporting TNE to do is to create more robust cost data so that we understand the cost of promoting these approaches. And a critical part of that is understanding the adoption dynamics. There is a whole host of reasons that people, smallholder farmers, might be averse to adopting these approaches. There's a cost to them. It's risky to adopt something new. It might not work out. They don't know if the changes would be best for them, or they might not trust the people giving advice. So I think it's really important that as we think about scale, we've got a good grasp on what the adoption barriers are and what the most effective means of driving adoption and encouraging adoption when there is such a kind of positive cost benefit proposition for farmers. So yeah, de-risking and innovation is about accumulating evidence, and that needs good unit economics, including the assumptions about how many people are going to pick this up if financed. I'll leave it there for that one, Anna.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. And it seems we should go for a pragmatic approach and measure the most important things. I hope our third panelist is also online, Macpherson, the Deputy Director of the Land Resources Conservation in Malawi. So my question to you is, how can in situ and ex situ rainwater harvesting technologies be catalyzed from your perspective?
Thank you very much, the moderator. And I'm glad to be here representing the government sector. I work for the Malawi government Ministry of Agriculture, but within the Ministry of Agriculture, we do have the Land Resources Conservation Department. So responsible for sustainable land and water management, primarily on agricultural land, but also focusing at landscapes and watersheds. So as government, there are several approaches that we're using and several tools that we're using to catalyze in situ and ex situ water harvesting. Basically, our mandate, we are supposed to provide an enabling environment. And we do this through the policies that we have, the different policies. And these policies give specific government departments the mandate to implement specific interventions that will support landscape restoration and water harvesting. So there are several policies within the Ministry of Agriculture, but also when you look at the government sector, there are also other ministries who have supporting policies that can support investments and innovative financing in landscape restoration. So recently, we have just launched the Agricultural Land Resource Management Policy, which is stressing the need for financing and private investment in the landscape restoration. So this particular policy, it calls for bringing in the different players, both public and private sector, to participate in the landscape restoration, and the government to provide the necessary policy environment that can support these investments. So setting up of standards and also providing the necessary incentives, as the area speaker has also said, can be through tax breaks, rebates, or subsidies. This is what the policies are also mentioning. This is the Agricultural Land Resource Management Policy that I'm talking of. But we also have got other policies that are housed in other ministries that do provide similar incentives. So within the Ministry of Economic Planning and Development, these are the ones who are responsible for the tax breaks, tax holidays, and they also link up with other ministries, Ministry of Trade and Industry, and also other government institutions. So in terms of the policy framework, I can say we do have a robust policy framework. What we need is how we can bridge the different policies so that they can work. Because most of these policies are housed in different departments, different ministries, and there's always a challenge of working in silos. So one of the biggest challenges that we overcome and mainstream and harmonize the different policies so that they can make a difference in terms of implementation. There are also other models that we're using, business models that the government has initiated several programs that can also that have proven to be helpful in catalyzing water harvesting in terms of soft loans, low interest loans, but also other small grants which the government has been giving out to farmers who are involved in water harvesting, both in situ and ex situ. So for the time being, I think that's what I can say. Government providing an enabling environment in terms of the policy framework, and also making sure that all these policies can be integrated so that they can work better. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those very useful observations, the importance of working across sectors, bridging silos, bringing together public and private sector. So I think due to time constraints, I have to thank our panel here. We don't have time for a second question, unfortunately, but you provided very valuable and detailed responses to the questions we had. So thank you. And with that, I will hand over the moderation to my colleague David, and we will move on to the next presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you for this very interesting insights. We can applaud. I would like now to introduce Mr. Renier Veldman, Program Manager from Meta, who is going to give a presentation. We can give him a round of applause as well.
Okay. Yes. Well, thank you very much for joining this session. As mentioned, my name is Reinier Veldman, working with Meta from the Netherlands. I also... Oh, sorry. Yeah, that works better. My name is Reinier Veldman from the Netherlands. I also have a background of living for 5 years in Malawi, where I also met Mark Versen, and I don't think I met Isaac, but we have been in the same place. It's a very nice country, also if you want to visit as a tourist. Welcoming people, the warm heart of Africa. I think you know. Yeah, thanks also for... You pressed the button. I'll leave my hands here. Thanks also for allowing us to be part of this session and to talk a bit about supported self-supply, which is more from a water supply angle, which, as Isaac also showed in his picture 6, is very important for urban households, but also for rural households. So a little bit of background to Meta. We joined GOPA, you might have heard of it, a German consulting company last year. We have teams in Ethiopia, Kenya, Turkey, and about 40 staff. And we are also hosting what is called the Smart Center Group, a network of training centers for water and sanitation. Well, I think groundwater, we're at a water conference, it's very much key to development. Being able to access groundwater can lead to a lot of change for households, for industries, for farmers. And what is also good to know that in the global north, so also where we are here, before there were piped water systems, everyone was using, or most people were using groundwater at premises for their water supply, which is called self-supply, supplying water yourself. Also farmers in the global south, they can only develop beyond maybe the first step if they have access to water for domestic and also for agricultural use, which in general would be a well shared or for themselves. And also, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, there's a lot of potential to use groundwater because only a very small part of the accessible groundwater, and which can be used in a sustainable manner, is being used so far. Well, this session is also about landscape restoration, and I think we are all very much aware that it's important to adapt to climate change to be ready for the future. And in that, for households, for agriculture, water is essential. Accessing the water has to be done in a very sustainable way. So I think there's two very important conditions. One is to have affordable conditions, affordable in economic sense, so that the cost of accessing the technology, of purchasing it, is as low as possible. And also the water balance. So any water that is extracted should also be added back into the ground. And then deep bed farming is, of course, one of the ways of doing that. Next in the presentation, I will just show a few concepts which, as Meter we have been promoting, and of course we're not the only one doing so. Well, especially in arid areas, a technology called half-moon buns in the lower left corner is used, where you dig a small trench which captures the water which flows overland. I think one of the examples which was also shown from Zimbabwe, it's a sort of concept of road runoff, where there was a small trench besides the path or the road, capture water from the road, also avoiding damage to the road or to the feeder road. Another example is sand dams, so basically building a concrete barrier across a seasonal river, capturing the sand, which creates also an aquifer and which gives the water more chance and more time to infiltrate. Water spreading weirs, sponge cities, all concepts which, if you're more interested, you can also find through Google. Going back to a smaller scale, at household level, where you could have a small pond with a plastic liner to avoid losing the water which you want to use at the household into the ground directly. There can also be wire brick cement tanks built by local private sector. You can have underground tanks such as the Emma's tank, and you can see the cost range per cubic meter. And it's also important, usually storing the water underground comes at a lower cost per cubic meter than if you store it above ground. So if you build an elevated tank, it comes at quite a higher cost compared to a tank which is dug in the ground. Tube recharge is also one practical example. Basically, you dig a small pit. In this pit, you drill maybe a meter or 2 or 3. You add a small casing pipe with slots. If the water collects in the pit, it infiltrates through the pipe, and then the idea is that you have more area for the water to infiltrate. First you capture it, and then you give it time to infiltrate. Then the deep bed farming has been explained. The reason I'm also including it because we see it as one of the measures in the palette of options of landscape restoration and increasing the capturing of the water. The picture has also been shown, but I think it is a very powerful picture to see the difference between the conventional farming, which in a way I think is also seen as modern, because ridges were initially introduced as a modern technology, although I think they really destroyed the land, unfortunately. And then on the right, you see a much more healthier crop, which can also withstand the dry spells. And the yields, they increase. Of course, it's not easy, it's hard work, which is, I think, common for farming, but it pays off. So much for the pitch. We talk now landscape restoration, capturing water. Water challenges, rural sub-Saharan Africa, it's of course very generalized, but the calculation is that over 300 million people, they lack so-called the basic service. So a source of water within a 30-meter round trip from your home, which is just one bucket carrying up and down. And also, the ones who have a source, 20 to 40% of the hand pumps are broken. They're for various reasons. Lack of ownership, lack of funds, maybe they were not installed properly. So that's a serious challenge, where also I think what Jenny has presented and what others have also presented can contribute to. I see the pictures are partly over the text, but one option, which is also a financing mechanism which can contribute, is what we call supported self-supply. So self-supply being the family investing themselves, supported meaning governments or others, they partly support the family in accessing their own source of water technology, which can be done through what is called smart techs. It's a range of technologies. If you're more interested, you can visit our booth at the 5th floor. What is very key is that there's local ownership. And we found from experience that if a household is owning a source of water, a pump, a well, the chance of them maintaining it is almost 100% compared to community-owned, where, as we saw, it's maybe 40% or, sorry, 60% of the facilities which are functioning. Well, 2 examples from Zambia. It starts in terms of financing. It starts with an initial project of maybe 600 pumps or wells, and then through time, through training of private sector, well, it doesn't expand on its own, but it does keep expanding, and more people are able to and willing to invest in the source of water themselves. And what are some effects? And then I'm also wrapping up. What we see is maybe people think, yeah, if you help people get water at their premises, they will keep it to themselves. But the practice is, at a cost or at no cost, people will be sharing with their neighbors. So if you help get a pump installed at one household, you will be sure that they will share it with their neighbors, and maybe 200 people are benefiting from this own well. The difference is that one family will ensure it's always working. And there's less headache with broken pumps. And also, I think, similar to the deep bed farming, the main contribution to a sustainable development goal is, of course, on 6, on water, but there will also be effects on decreasing poverty, increasing access to food, improving the gender balance, and also providing employment opportunities. And yeah, we think that through adopting this approach, besides what's already happening, the government or private sector or investors, they can reduce the cost of providing access to water, which is maybe a more efficient way of using the existing funding, besides, of course, trying to access additional funding. So that's my short presentation. Feel free to pass by our booth, and thank you for the attention.
All right, thank you for your presentation. And I would like now to introduce the president of the International Rainwater Harvesting Alliance, Hen Eijnen, who is joining us online. You are muted, we cannot hear you. Can you please unmute yourself? We cannot hear you.
Oh. Han, can you hear us? You are muted. Excuse
me. Can you send him a message maybe on the chat?
Is it? Yes. So my name is Han Heinen. Is the presentation on? Yes, good. My name is Han Heinen. I'm the president of the International Rainwater Harvesting Alliance. I would like to contribute a small presentation on rain communities in Nepal. First of all, I would like to thank Siwi and Tieni and Meta for contributing to this session and making it multifaceted, and of course, focusing very much on the innovative finance, which is a critical issue for all. I've taken this particular picture of a watershed in the Rupatal area in Nepal, simply to show that, the rainfall that is falling higher up the hills, the mountains, is gradually percolating down through the surface, but also through the soil, and ends up in the Rupatal at the end of this slide. Next, does it do that? No. Let me see. Page up, page down. Why don't I get it? You are screen sharing. Come on, my friend. I have a problem getting the slide on. Come on. What is the problem? It doesn't continue. That is the problem. Okay. How does that happen? I'm sorry for the small delay. The thing that I wanted to say was simply that, you know, IRA is a small organization based in Geneva. It links up a number of national rainwater harvesting organizations from around the globe. And we work on promoting and advocating various aspects of rainwater harvesting, quite obviously, and some of them have already been mentioned by Meta in the previous discussion. So that is very helpful. We have been working with a lot of partners, not only the national agencies, but also a lot of NGOs around the world, and contributing to conferences and various other activities that promote rainwater harvesting applications. The main issue, of course, is the concern that, you know, we have to somehow convince the politicians and planners that rainwater harvesting is a good thing to do. Now, that, of course, was the key issue of this particular session, as presented by Isaac. I still cannot.
Excuse me, we can share your presentation here on site, so if you let us take the control.
Somehow there is a problem there.
Yeah, you have to tell us next slide then, so that we can change.
So next, please. Yeah, if you can. I stop sharing.
Thanks.
Yes, okay, so that story I already said. I mean, this is what we are. And we share work with a lot of agencies around the world. Here, for instance, the yellow ones are our partners in various countries, and the green ones are the ones that contributed to the biodiversity COP16 in Cali last year, when we organized a session on rain and biodiversity. Next, please. So rain is a resource that we cannot afford to waste, and still we do that. So that is a critical problem. As it's quite clear that, you know, there is less water available for all the particular uses that we need. So we need to be able to retain the rain sufficiently for local use and for agriculture in particular. On the right-hand side, you can see we focus on WASH, on agriculture, on food sovereignty, ecosystem restoration, as discussed also by Macpherson, and of course the urban settings, things that Rainier also mentioned. Please, next one. We work with Kansha Nepal in Kaski, Chitwan, that is in the Pokhara area of Nepal, low-income areas, a lot of external migration because of lack of work, and people, as you can see on the right-hand side pictures, living right on top of the hills. Here they have their water tanks already, but of course it's an issue. Unfortunately, the rain only falls 4 or 5 months a year. There's plenty of it, like close to 3,000 millimeters, but how to store it? Next. And so this is why we work with Kansha Nepal, an agency that has been working in that area for a very long time already. And that is critical, because ultimately these projects can only work through people understanding the local situation, having the trust of the community, and then being able to gradually discuss, why did you not retain the infiltration pits, the ponds that you used to have, and all these type of things. And so gradually, you know, local dialogue then occurs on the water scarcity, and solutions are being found. Next. Trust is a critical issue, but also information. Rain, how much rain, where, seasonal springs, pockeries, the traditional ponds that you have. and then the additional interventions that can be taken up, which of course take a lot of hard work, but that is available often. And so what we do as part of the mobilization is creating participatory 3D mapping, making people feel what is happening. We have good experience with that even from the 1980s when I used to live in the same area, making people actually touch these solutions, and that is what we are trying to do here. Next. One of our partners in the COP16 presented various natural solutions, and here are some that I wanted to just show as again saying the same thing as what Rainier is saying. We are pushing, we are promoting, we are trying, but of course there are many others who are also doing the same thing, and it's that linking and networking and sharing knowledge and experience that is critical. Next. So here you see a 3D presentation of the watershed that this community is living in. And so together with the community, we then work on a plan for 3+ years. I mean, these are things that are not going to take overnight. And the community contributes 30 to 50% in terms of labor and materials. This is quite substantial. Of course, that is also a traditional way of doing it. But that also means that you have to take your time. Not everything can happen directly. A step-by-step approach. Just take your time and get going. Next.
Can we ask you to conclude?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
So then what we do is promoting the POCARIs. I think that is the main concern here. Restoring what people already had and making sure it continues to work for the next 20, 30 years. Next, please. Okay, so then it ultimately looks like this, but of course that is ideal. Thank you very much. My last comment on this is, and that is linked up with what Rainier is saying, 6 to 8% of the population of the world will need to rely on rainwater. So if we don't do anything about it, we are in trouble. We will never get to 6.1 universal coverage of drinking water. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for a very interesting overview of what ERA is working with, and thank you for supporting this session. I would now like to invite Alex Girard, who is TNI's Executive Director in the UK, to provide some reflections and concluding remarks. Welcome, Alex.
Just check this is on before I start. Right, yes. Thank you very much for everyone for attending this session. I think what we've seen throughout this morning is that there is a lot of great work going on around rainwater harvesting and about land management and water access. However, there are still lots of barriers to link up the policy that exists, the policy that needs to be created, and linking that in with the organizations like TNE, Meta, that are doing this on the ground, that have learned over years how this actually works, how it can be implemented, and how we empower communities to create sustainable communities that no longer have to rely on charities like TNE and other funding, but actually can also incentivize investment in creating these holistic solutions across landscapes and catchments. We managed to do this started to do this in Malawi. We're one of the only charities in the world to have an agricultural practice formally adopted by the national government. It took us many, many years, but we've now done it. And now we're working with the government to look at how we can deliver this across the whole of Malawi and start to spread this across sub-Saharan Africa. We're working with organizations like ARUP to develop programs so that we can train the government, because we've been requested to, but then it also requires that initial investment. Like so many of these methods, they're not actually expensive on a person-to-person basis, and once implemented, then the communities can just thrive through this. So I want to thank everyone who delivered today, and I want to thank everyone for attending. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you to everybody who has followed us today here on site and also online. And if you want to know more about our different initiatives, you can find that on the Tiara website with links also to these different NGOs that we are working with. So I think with that we conclude this session. Thanks again.
Thank you and bye.